Uh, Even you are not audible to me.
I am not audible.
Now it's fine. Yes.
Okay, okay. No, I was just saying, shall we start with a minute of silence?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Once again, would be good to have the cameras on. It is my utmost pleasure and fortune to be welcoming Dr. Sampadananda Mishra. Not only is he one of the foremost Sanskrit scholars that we know in the country and, in fact, in the world, and apart from all his different accolades, for me, he's my teacher of the Bhagavad Gita. So when I came to the works of Mother and Sri Aurobindo, it's through him that, uh, you know, Bhagavad Gita opened for me. And I remember him very fondly for one of the, actually, two of the classes that he took. One of them was on Jal, and how layer by layer, how he went deep into just one word, Jalam, and really revealed to us the magic and the wonder of Sanskrit. And through that, the magic and the wonder of our own being. And the other one was in a Vedas workshop on Agni. And I always remember that, Sampada is the one who talks about Agni because he's the first person in my life, who opened me up to the eternal fire, the Agni. And he has this very magical way of introducing anything, bringing in the rigor and the profoundness of Sanskrit with the vision and the paradigm of the works of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. So, on that note, welcome Sampada. Today's session is going to be on aspiration, and probably we can begin with, I can just probably put one question, and there onwards we can open the floor and take other questions. So I thought maybe we can just begin with this question that there is Agni in the heart, but there is also the fire in the gut, And often we confuse, what is our wants and our desires with the eternal Agni. So how is it that, we can discern our desires and really the true eternal aspiration? So over to you, Sampath.
Hmm. So, namaskar to all of you, and I'm very happy to be here as a part of this initiative. And it's an initiative which, like opens up many doors. It's just named as Integral Education Portal, but it's actually the portal of the integral life, integral yoga. So, in a sense, what already you all must have seen, like the kind of materials which are placed here and the way things are presented very methodically, step by step. We are entering into through this portal into the depth of the whole practice of integral yoga, the Purna Yoga that Sri Aurobindo and the Mother have given to us. In principle, or essentially, the principles of yoga, the principles of life, the principles of education, they are same. They cannot be separated from each other. And in Purna Yoga, when we have given ourselves for the practice of Purna Yoga, or our life to be guided by the Purna Yoga, or the life attains to the fulfillment in Purna Yoga. So, there, like we all are familiar with that small booklet, The Mother. Looks very small, but it has everything that a sadhak needs, everything that one needs, a spiritual seeker needs to follow. And we all are familiar with the very first sentence there, that these two forces alone, one is the call from below and the grace from above. This is Bhagavad Anugraha. When we are calling grace, there are many words which are like daya, karuna, kripa. They're used for compassion, sympathy, empathy, and grace also. But there is a beautiful word that we use in Hindi, in most regional languages, and in most, uh, you know, and especially in Sanskrit, amongst many other words, anugraha. So let me go step by step, and then we will go for the question answer. So this is very much necessary to understand what is anugraha. How do we become worthy of the anugraha of the divine? And then we come to like what is that which makes us worthy of receiving that anugraha. Then we'll come to the aspiration part and then move ahead. Anugraha, in a true sense, is not just the divine's compassion or the divine blessings or divine grace, but anugraha is that when that happens, look at the design of the word anugraha. Graha means to seize, to capture, to grasp, to take over. And anu has a sense of behind or after, to seize after. So, in a true sense, the Bhagavad Anugraha is that when that happens, it is the divine himself who seizes, who runs behind the seeker, behind the bhakta, seizing after Anugraha. Like he is, the divine is behind bhakta, behind the seeker. He is after him. Now, the bhakta doesn't have to do anything. If the bhakta wants, can run away from him. But he is not going to leave. He is going behind to catch him. And this is where we all are familiar with. And to elaborate this, uh, we all have heard this beautiful story of the footprint that describes what anugraha is. So, all those who do not know or not familiar with this story, the footprint is that a young man, he has a dream. In his dream, he sees these two sets of footprints, and then when he analyzes, he finds that these two sets of footprints are, one is his and then another is of the divine. And then after some distance, he finds that there is only one set of footprint. And then he analyzes, he finds that these two sets of footprints are those periods of his time when he is, these are the happiest period in his life. But when he is in trouble, the most difficult phase of his life, so he has only one set of footprint, he then finds that it is his footprint and the God is not there with him, the divine is not there with him. Then he meets the God and then asks him, why is this? That during the happiest period of my life, you were with me, walking with me, moving with me. But why did you leave me during the most difficult phase of my life? Then he said that if you observe that in the most difficult phase of time, that one footprint that you see, it is not yours. It is my footprint. Look at it closely. And why my footprint? What happened to your footprint? Because I was carrying you on my shoulder. That is what is anugraha. When that happens, the God takes care of every responsibility of ours. He takes us on his shoulder. So that is anugraha. He sees us after. And to become worthy of that anugraha, what Sri Aurobindo writes right in the beginning, that intense aspiration, that intense call to receive that, to become worthy of that, has to rise from below to above. Now, this below above, not in terms of, like the direction, because that's again is uh, difficult to decide what is below, what is above. But we understand what it is meant by. There has to be this call, this intense aspiration. Then he says that to become worthy of this anugraha, in that call, in that invocation, there has to be purity. The divine light, the divine help, the divine guidance, the truth can be at work only when the temple is clean. So, what is demanded from us is that pure, intense, sincere aspiration from below. That is where our effort is necessary. And Divyanshi had asked this question, that what is the difference between the desire and the aspiration? Aspiration also is a desire, but desire of different kind. It is not a desire which is prompted by our lower movements. It's not the desire which pops off from the lower vital, from the lower nature of ours, which wants to fulfill and satisfy itself, all our material needs, all our impulses, instincts, our tendencies, our fancies, our preferences. In aspiration, all these things are not there. In aspiration, it is that one thing, the divine matters, nothing else. Only one thing matters, that light, that fire, that pure flame, that pure, you know, uh, steady flame, unwavering flame. That's how it has been seen by all the seers and sages or spiritual masters who have done that, who were worthy of receiving the anugraha of the divine. So, and when we become more and more conscious of ourselves, we can read so many things, we can listen to many lectures, we can have certain clarity from that, yet that greatest clear conviction will come only when we become more and more aware of the different movements that is happening within ourselves. Then we will be able to clearly distinguish between whether it is a desire prompted by the lower nature or by anything else which is limited in its scope, which is, you know, binding, which is bound, which is narrow, or it is something which is leading to the vastness, the infinite, the truth, the light. So therefore, the mother in the science of living, where, you know, there's the basic writing that we all should read to start with what we need to do. So the first step is to become conscious of ourselves, to become conscious of all the different parts of our being, all the different parts of our movement, where from it is coming. And how do we become free from the lower nature and then move forward towards the attainment of that higher thing? Then we become worthy of the anugraha of the divine. And for that, what the mother writes in that writing is, we all have to become clearly aware of the very purpose of our life, the very aim of our life. If that aim is not clear, then also the aspiration cannot be formed properly. Now, let me explain in another using some Sanskrit terminology. Now, aspiration is usually translated into Sanskrit and other regional languages here as abhipsa or aspruha. The spruha, merely the word spruha is connected with the desire, the fulfillment of all our, you know, material needs or the impulses, instincts. But when A comes, this is the beauty of the divine language, which has the power to make us, and then which enables us to distinguish between what is not divine, what is divine. In a sense, in a deeper sense, everything is divine. Yet, within that framework, there are forces at work. There are something which doesn't allow us to feel the presence of the divine or realize the divine, even though it is created by the divine. So, this language where it adds a to it, spruha, becomes a spruha. What does the sound a do? Now, when we look at the purity of the vibration behind each sound, we'll see a pulls out the energy, makes it manifest, and then connects it with the Bruhat. A has the sense of Bruhat, expansion. So when it is simple Spruha, it connects us with that little thing, narrow, my family, my, anything which is narrow. When A is added, it pulls me out of that narrow state and then connects me with the vast, with the Bruhat. That's why the seers and sages of the past of the Vedic system of yoga, when we look at it, Satyam, Ritam, and Brihat. If someone asks, like, okay, we have to become aware of the very goal of our life, but what should be that goal? And Mother very clearly explains, like, what should be that goal. Our goal should be vast, disinterested, and other attributes she has added there. So this aim, the higher aim of our life is to attain to this Satyam, Ritam, and Brihat. And that's what is our own home. Satyam, Ritam, Brihat is our own home. In the Vedas, we'll find that there is a terminology called Swam Damam. Swam Damam means one's own home. It's said about Agni, Vardhamanam Svedame, growing in its own home. But what is that own home? The ritualistic interpreters like Sayanacharya and many others have interpreted it as that, you know, burning heavily in the fire room. But deeper psychological, spiritual sense is that Agni's own home is Satyam, Ritam, and Brihat. Satyam is that static truth. I exist, you exist, the whole world exists. This is the truth. This is the static truth that everything exists. Everything is a manifestation of that supreme Sat, that pure Sat. This is the truth. This is the static truth. But what we need to do with that truth, that dynamic aspect, that everything has to set in rhythm, in harmony, in order. Dynamically, everything has to be placed in its own place, has to be given the rightful place to bring that order, to bring that harmony, to bring that pure dynamism into life is the function of rhythm. The Vedic system of yoga didn't use the word dharma. So dharma, it used the word rhythm, rita. That rita, becomes the dharma of the letter ends. So Satyam, Ritam, and Brihat. Brihat is our own home, but not devoid of this Satyam and Ritam. So Satyam, Ritam, Brihat, they are like one. They are not in isolation. So in Brihat, Satyam, and Ritam, they are operating. So it is our own home, which is the source of ours. Towards that, we need to move. And when we become more and more conscious of that own home, our the source where from we come and the source where we should go, vardhamanam svedame. And then it is said that Agni is not just growing in its own home somewhere else, but nihitam guhayam, angushtamatra purushah madhya atmani tishtati. Not bigger than the size of a thumb, like a steady flame. Nengate sopama smrta. In the Gita, we find that it doesn't flicker. That unwavering flame which is eternally burning, which is secret within the center of our heart. That flame of aspiration, it grows more and more and more. And that own home is within ourselves. That Satyam, Ritam, Bruhat is within ourselves. We need to turn our gaze inward and then be in contact with that. And it is through that, again, we spread, we expand, and then become one with that cosmic Satyam, Ritam, and Bruhat. From individual, we become universal. So, this, if this is the understanding, if this is what is the real aim of our life, then if we are conscious about it, then we know what kind of aspiration that we should form. What should be our real aspiration, true aspiration. And in that, like in one of these small videos which we had published, so there I had narrated one story that one disciple, he was very impatient to see God. He goes to his guru and then asks him, so when can I see my God? He said, do you think of him? He said, yes, I think of him. He said, go and then practice this, or try to see him, feel him at every moment. And if you do it, definitely he will be seen by you. So he goes back and then puts his effort and then comes back and reports that I didn't see God. Did you manage remembering him always? Did you manage remembering him, seeing him, thinking about him always? He said, no, it happened for a certain period of time. Then, like the distraction happens. It is what happens with every one of us, that we are capable of remembering him, we're capable of holding him in our thought, maybe for few minutes or few hours, maybe, like if someone has proceeded much on the path of sadhana. As the mother says, like the first 3 minutes of the meditation, it's very, everything goes fine. So after 3 minutes, all distraction begins. So if we are capable of holding him in our thought, in our consciousness, every moment, then something may happen. We may have his darshan. But that is the kind of intensity and sincerity we need to bring into our sadhana. And when that happens, we become more and more clear about it. then distinguishing between our lower nature and the desire and the aspiration, it becomes a spontaneous, very natural. By default, we can do that. We become aware of that, and then everything that in our aspiration. So, what is the next step in the integral yoga? These three catchwords or the three basic things that we should remember, that this aspiration, rejection, and surrender, they all again, the three of these are together. You cannot separate them. Aspiration is separate, rejection is separate, and surrender is separate. In aspiration, there has to be this thing, that rejection is not something that something comes and I don't like, I just knock it out. No. Rejection means not to allow oneself to come under the influence of anything which is not divine, not to open the door towards any undivine adverse forces. It means to constantly cling to the truths. Such a profound message that the mother has given: cling to the truths. Just two words: clinging to the truth. But so difficult to do, so difficult to do. So when we cling to that, always we open ourselves. The mother says that hold tight, don't give way. Slightest way we open ourselves towards any adverse force, any negative energy, it rushes into. It's like a flood, like a tsunami. It enters into our consciousness and disturbs everything. Very little. Like if we have given ourselves for intense sadhana, so that is the care that we need to take. With aspiration, this rejection happens spontaneously. If we have a strong aspiration, and in that aspiration there is intensity, there is purity, there is sincerity, then rejection is a natural part of it. And in aspiration, there has to be this natural sense of surrender, self giving, consecration. And again, when we are talking about surrender, these three we have to take together: surrender, self giving, and consecration. By surrender, the mother says, it is a decision which one takes to hand over one's responsibilities to the divine. A strong will to hand over all our responsibilities to the divine. That is what she means by surrender. And very, very difficult to take such a decision. But that is the truth. Then, once that decision is taken of handing over all our responsibilities to the divine, then the next is self giving. Self giving is not something again separate from that surrender, but she says, organizing every aspect of our life around that decision. Organizing every aspect of our life, every activity of our life, any movement of our life, of our being, around that decision, that it is handed over to, all our responsibilities are handed over to the divine around that decision. And when that organization takes place intensely, the ultimate result is consecration. Consecration happens. No one does, it happens spontaneously when we are more and more in that state of self giving. And self giving organizing, because at the center there is divine. These are the processes by which the aspiration, rejection, and surrender, that's how we enter into the world of Purna Yoga and then continue our sadhana, being in this world, participating in every activity of this world. So, with these words, I think I'll stop here and then we will take off the questions. Or if Divyansia has any other question that I need to address, you can ask me.
I guess we can open the questions from the audience. Maybe audience can put it in the chat and we can take it from the chat.
Divyansi, you will take it from chat and then ask me?
Yes, we can do
Okay,
it like that.
good.
We have a lot of people. I thought that's a good way. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat window, and from there we can ask Sampath.
We can ask question like that.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yes.
Pranam Mishra ji,
Namaskar, Madan Mohanji, Doctor.
very, very enlightening and beautiful talk. But I was surprised that the word dharma is not in the Vedas, it's rhythm.
It is
The,
Ritam. Yes.
but rhythm is the rule of law, so that's clear. But dharma really is not in Vedic literature. I'm surprised.
It's the rhythm. It is that which is prominent in the Vedic system of yoga. It is not that the word is not there, but it doesn't gain that prominence like it does in the later literature.
Just often a word would come here.
Yeah.
And the other problem is here now, this is really, what you have said is really real thing. But the practice is not so easy. A ritual becomes so easy to practice, and
Hmm.
people get naturally towards that side.
Hmm.
And even the ritual is puja, ashta, this is materialistic only. Because mind goes out, mind going out is easy. So people go that side. And
Hmm.
to go higher side is very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, rituals can be a way to attain to something. That's why the rituals were maybe created or thought of. But then what happens, like most rituals are becoming mechanical and robotic in nature. So that mechanical following of the ritual, just for the sake of some satisfaction that I have done my ritual, so that way it doesn't help in the inner growth. So ritual must become a reminder to the very purpose of our life, and then how should we function. We should, participate in every activity in the world with that awareness. So that's why ritual is enjoined with everything. Like if I go and then pick up my toothbrush, so I have to recite a mantra or I have to follow a ritual. That means I am not just doing the work mechanically but consciously. So to turn every mechanical action into a conscious action, there is some ritual enjoined with every action. That was the purpose. But then we are doing that ritual also mechanically, without
Becoming,
putting mechanically, without like putting our effort for that conscious growth. So that's how the ritual remains as a mechanical ritual. It doesn't help much except giving some satisfaction that yes, I am doing my ritual.
so we have to purify ourselves so that we become fit to receive the divine grace.
Yes, that
Or
purity is very much necessary, because that's what we see, that the light, the truth, the divine can function or can have its own, exercise its own power only when there is the purity, only when the temple is clean. So the falsehood and the truth cannot remain together. So we have to make ourselves free from all falsehood, all weaknesses, all errors, all mistakes, all impurities. Then the divine grace can take place in us. The temple has to be clean.
so we become patram.
Sampada,
Yeah.
Namaste, Vivek.
Yes. Namaste, Vivek.
Uh, there is a prayer, or we just always use we use. Let thy light shall be in me, thy strength my force. Does the working of that statement, what you just explained of, um, I'm trying to understand the more the working of this statement, and I vaguely see some relationship what you are just speaking. So do you see some relationship for
I
that
mean, if
state
the
of exactly
aspiration
working
is
in our
that
life?
through this prayer we are aspiring for that light and truth, yes. If our aspiration is for the light and the truth, and let that light, that truth, that divine lead our life, so then this prayer definitely has a relation and holds the truth. Was that your question or something else?
No, I was so it's one thing to recite the prayer, let thy light shall be in me, thy strength, my force. Uh, but how do I understand that the light is working in me? How do
Okay.
I understand that strength is with me?
Yes. Yeah. The on one side, it takes time for us to become conscious of that. If the whole purpose is that we have to identify the divine's will working in us, ultimately it is the divine will which has to be fulfilled. The truth has to be fulfilled. The light has to. How do I know? Is it divine's will or is it my individual will? So that is where the greatest difficulty lies. How do we know? We can know the only way what has been shown to us by becoming more and more conscious of ourselves. If that awareness grows, then that understanding comes with that grown awareness. Then we can, definitely feel it within, yes, that light is working, that strength is working. And when that light works, it brings joy with it, pure joy. It
Mm,
brings peace with it. It brings freshness with it. It brings fragrance with it. It brings beauty with it. And we can experience that in our life. And then we know that it is, yes, it is working. And anything which creates no joy, anything
mhm.
which doesn't, like give that ananda,
Right.
anything which creates more difficulty, doesn't allow us to grow on the path, doesn't give that freshness, then we mark it that yet we have to intensify our aspiration. We have to have more purity, more sincerity. So that's why the mother says that if you have a difficulty, instead of putting the blame on anything else, mark that I am insincere.
Hmm. Yes.
So it is depending upon the degree of our sincerity, degree of
Hmm.
our purity and intensity in the aspiration. So that works, and then we can feel that by
Thank you.
experiencing the light, truth, freshness, peace, silence,
Hmm.
calmness. Yes.
Thank you.
We have a few questions on chat. I'm going to give preference to the questions related to aspiration. There is one by Ajna where she is asking, Pranam Sampada, I'm curious to know what Sri Krishna speaks of aspiration in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, and
Hmm.
how was Arjuna asked to put that into practice?
Huh. This is a simple thing like when Krishna is saying to Arjuna that you fight. You fight means like you don't run away from the world. With escaping, running away is not going to help you. But you must fight. But you should know what is the art and science of fighting, how you should fight, what attitude you should have while fighting. So there he says one very important statement. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhyaja. That you fight, but see that there is not a single moment when I am not held in your consciousness. I am not there in your thought. I am not there in your remembrance. So the constant remembrance. So that is what is expected of Arjuna, that by constantly invoking the presence of the divine, by constantly holding him in the thought in our consciousness, we must be operative in the world, because that's what is the greatest thing which keeps us, connecting with the divine.
But if you are Arjuna is constantly aware of the divine, then he can fight properly. He has
Sorry,
to.
sorry, no, you are not clear. Can you become a little close to the microphone?
Yeah. Uh, then now clear now.
Yes.
Now, if Arjuna is to be always conscious of the divine, how can he fight properly?
Yeah,
He
that
has
is
to.
the beauty. It is not that when you are conscious of the divine, you cannot do anything. Like, by becoming conscious of the divine doesn't mean that you sit your eyes closed and sit in tapasya and merge in somewhere. By holding him in your consciousness, you can work, you can be operative, but don't miss that connection. And the mother also speaks of the same thing, like living one life. In ordinary consciousness, when we are living a very ordinary life, we are living so many lives in one life without any connection. So she says, if you hold on to that one truth, remain connected with that, even though you are getting engaged in various things, yet you are living that one life, because that connection has to be there always, whatever we may be doing. We can hold in our consciousness the thought of the divine and then work.
Shall I ask another question, Sampadan?
Yes, yes.
There is one by Ram where he's asking where and how does the spiritual aspiration and the mainstream job for living merge?
Sorry.
Where and how does the spiritual aspiration and the mainstream job for living merge?
Oh, mainstream job for living.
Yeah.
Okay.
How does the spiritual aspiration merge with the job that one is in?
But it is like when we have that aspiration for the higher life, so everything is included in that. It takes it doesn't reject any aspect of life. If the aspiration is for the higher life, so in that aspiration, everything is included. In that higher life, everything is included, whatever we do. But that is done from a different state of consciousness. We may be doing all our jobs, whatever we want to do in our life. We become a doctor, engineer, or whatever we want to become in the life. But that doesn't become any obstacle in our spiritual progress. The spirituality is to remain connected with the spirit, be influenced by that, be guided by that. So in spiritual life, everything is included. It's like the ocean, where every, like river merges in that.
That's such a very beautiful way of putting it. There's one more question, which is how can one distinguish between physical, vital, and mental aspiration?
Physical, mental, vital aspiration. I need to understand this, like what is meant by physical aspiration and mental aspiration or vital aspiration.
Would you like?
Aspiration in a true sense is uh, psychic in its nature, the true aspiration. So if the physical aspiration, then we in a higher sense should be like the physical aspiring to be united with the psychic, the vital aspiring to become united with the psychic, or the mind aspiring to become united with the thing. But when we talk about aspiration, it is more of that, you know the psychic nature. So from our vital, what comes is when we are connected with the lower vital also like these two parts, the lower vital and the higher vital. So in the lower vital, everything that pops up from the lower vital is not aspiration, but the desire that needs to be remedied. And that remedy can take place by aspiring, uh, by coming in contact with the inmost being. That should be our aspiration, higher aspiration.
There's one more question, which is when in the early stage of one's sadhana, one is not able to distinguish mental will and aspiration. Do you have any
One is not able to distinguish between
mental will and aspiration?
uh,
Do you have any suggestions for the sadhaks?
uh, yeah, so even in the mental will also like we can mentally think of something higher. So in that way we train, we force the mechanical, physical, or the mind connected with the physical and vital to think something higher, something deeper. So that becomes a process by which one comes in contact with the higher aspiration. So in the initial stage, definitely, I mean, the mind gets distracted. That's why we have to work at various levels. But we can work through any level also, but at various levels. So we need that purification at every level, at the level of physical, at the level of vital, at the level of mental. But it is ultimately that purification has to happen at all levels. Then the true aspiration, when every part of our being is connected with the innermost being, then the true aspiration can be formed. The true aspiration is like a true sankalpa. If I have to take this word sankalpa, now what happens? As long as there is any fragmentation, any division, any dvandva or dvidha bhava in any part of the being, any shrinking, any reservation, any hesitation in any part of the being, like Sri Aurobindo speaks right in the beginning of the mother, like one part of our being wants, but the other part rejects, doesn't want to participate, then it is not a true aspiration. In a true aspiration, in a sankalpa, every part of our being harmoniously come forward to form that aspiration without reservation, without hesitation, without shrinking, without any questioning, without any doubt, without any confusion. Each part of our being just wants that. Then the true aspiration can be formed. But it takes time to, to reach that level. But if there is slightest sincerity in our that beginning of the aspiration, the path is shown. The work will be done. We persist in our will. That persistence is very much necessary. We should not run away or drop with few failures. So that's why the mother says when she's speaking about the progress, no? So she says about that persistence in the will, persist in your will in spite of all failures, and an unflinching faith in the supreme grace. These are the pathaya. These are the things which can help us moving on the path. But all kinds of impatience needs to be removed from ours. So sadhak should never be impatient or ask this question like why is it not happening? When is it going to happen? Is it happening or not? There is this greatest assurance. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam saranam braja. You give yourself totally and then everything of yours will be taken care of. When that assurance is there, there should not be any question, any doubt. We continue with our sincerity, with our aspiration. That's where like this a beautiful story of the two bhaktas. uh, Once Narada meets these two bhaktas one by one, the first bhakta says, you are in contact with uh, the god, So can you ask me when he is going to give me darshan? Because I have been doing tapasya and my bhakti is very intense for him for a long time. And then when he is going to give darshan? And then the other bhakta also asked the same question. And on his return on the next trip, so the first bhakta he says, like I asked God. So he said, like you have a mango tree in your ashram. So count the leaves of this mango tree. So after those many years or lives, he will give darshan to you. He becomes so disappointed and then starts, shedding tears. And then he said, oh God, so many years I have to do sadhana. It's of no use. Any God has said that he will give me darshan after so many lives. So let me continue with my normal life. And the second bhakta, when he goes, he says that, like you have a tamarind tree in your garden, in your ashram. So count the leaves of those tamarind tree, and then after so many lives, he will give darshan. And that bhakta dances with joy. Wow. I don't care how many years, how many lives, but my God has given the words that he is going to give me darshan. That's all. So that makes him so happy. So joy, he starts dancing with joy, and the God appears right before him. That is the attitude. When, how, that all kinds of questions should not be there in us while pursuing the sadhana. We pursue the sadhana with that intensity, purity, and sincerity in our aspiration.
Such a profound answer, Sampata. What a story. Can't stop smiling. There's one more question we're going to take and then we can probably close. It's by Vasudha. She's asking how to help 8th and 9th standard class students understand the concept of aspiration, sense of purpose in light of divine work.
Sorry, can you repeat it once?
How can one help students of 8th and 9th standard to understand the concept of aspiration or sense of purpose in light of the divine work?
Uh, so, what would be the suggestions others who are present here? Like whether it is children or anyone of any age group. So we there are various ways by which we can convey this message, or we can make it reach to any age group, any children. So it can be done through the form of stories, it can be done through various examples, but the best thing, as we have seen, and when we look at the principles of education, that enlightenment, that prabodhanam, and the drishtanta, the example, and the prabhava, the influence. So if we can follow those principles and then work out things for different age group, so I think there are plenty of ways of conveying this message and then making them aware. So the first thing is that we set ourselves as an example before them, that whatever we are trying to convey to them, we are living that truth. And by drishtanta, by examples of various kinds, examples of oneself, that we can convey the message. And I don't think there is anything of the higher sadhana which cannot be conveyed to the children, because the children are more open and the psychic presence is more intense in the children. And we can, and they're very receptive. Grahana dharana patu bala. This is what is said about when Vasishta is speaking about Ramachandra. He said, Grahana Dharana Patu. Their Patu means expert. They have that ability to receive and holding the truths. If the truth can be conveyed in the rightful manner, the children are very receptive. The children are capable of holding that truth and following it. But we need to learn that way of conveying that message to them. And the best way is by living the truth by ourselves.
Sampada, there are 4 more questions. Would you like to end end on time, or shall we take 4 more questions?
Yeah, we have 3 4 minutes. We can go.
Okay. So, one question is, what is the difference between offering and surrender?
Yeah, the surrender, as we have understood from the writings of the mother, what mother says, that handing over all our responsibility, the will to hand over our responsibilities to the divine. By offering, as I understand, I always give this example of the flower. Like what mother says, be like a flower, open, frank. Keep yourself open to the light, to the truth. That openness, remaining in that state of plasticity, that no reservation state, no shrinking, that utter plasticity, namanyata in the being, in every part of the being. That is how offering happens. So the flower opens itself to the light, and the light penetrates into it. That's how it has its beauty, freshness, fragrance, color, everything in it. So when we keep ourselves open in every part of our being, so that's how we offer. By offering, I understand, by opening our consciousness, petal by petal, as the flower opens. So every part of the being, like petal by petal, we can keep open to the higher light, higher truth, higher grace, and have that plasticity in every part of our being, to be in that state of namanyata, accept everything as the divine's will, good or bad.
Probably this is the last question. What is the difference between concentrating on the flame in the heart and the eyebrow center?
It depends upon the swabhava or the temperament of the people. So the heart center, and what is given to us by Sri Aurobindo, the more importance is given to concentrate on the heart. But ultimately, this is also said that the head has to merge in the heart, because that is the source of everything. Mano hridi nirudhyacha, shutting the mind in the heart. Okay. So by concentrating, it becomes very easy to concentrate in the heart for some people. It becomes very easy for some people to concentrate on the head. But ultimately, the head and heart have to merge together. And the head has to merge in the heart, because that is the source of everything.
Thank you, Sampata. So I guess it's also 7:30. We won't be able to take any more questions. Yeah, I just wanted to thank on behalf of everybody for really these very beautiful stories, anecdotes, clarity, and depth and profoundness. And yeah, maybe we can end with a moment of silence.
So thank you all. I hope it was useful for you all. So invoking the divine presence and silence, we end.